Now, between September 2019 and June 2021, the cryptocurrency ecosystem expanded by 2,300%. According to estimates of digital currency ownership published by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, in 2021, 75% of the top 20 crypto economies were emerging markets and developing economies. Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria are among them. Joining me now from London in the United Kingdom is Dr. Iwa Salami. She's an associate professor in financial law at the University of East London and co-director of the Center of FinTech at UEL. Dr. Salami, welcome to Business Edge. When you look at the numbers, 4.5 million Kenyans, 4.2 million South Africans, and some 12.1 million Nigerians adopting digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, why are they finding such a landing place here on the continent? Why are we adopting them and taking to them so quickly?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here. Now, cryptocurrencies have acquired a lot of interest, particularly in Africa, fundamentally for two primary reasons. The first really is financial inclusion. Poorer people across the continent have been excluded or have had a history of being excluded from, for example, having a bank account. Cryptocurrencies present people the opportunity, particularly in Africa and other developing markets, the opportunity to be able to engage in these types of transactions without necessarily having to go through a bank. Obviously, what will be required is that they have internet access and they have a mobile device that gives them access. The second really is the history of economic instability, debt crisis issues, and of course, political instability that have also contributed to the weakening of African currencies. So if you combine these two factors, the inaccessibility to financial services, i.e. financial exclusion, plus the fact that you're dealing with weak African currencies, cryptocurrencies actually have come to, if you like, promises to address these two main issues, and therefore giving, if you like, Africans, poorer Africans, people that don't have access to financial services, the opportunity to actually transact in financial services.
I like this, the ending parts of your answer here, because you talked about the weakening of the currencies, and we've seen that happen in recent time around the continent. And one thing people are afraid of with cryptocurrencies is what they call Cryptozation. I hope I didn't stumble on that, but basically an idea that cryptocurrencies can become such a widespread means of payment that they replace domestic currencies unofficially. And when you look at the performance of maybe the Naira or it's the Kenyan shilling, you can see why people might want to go towards cryptocurrencies. Do you think that's a risk that African economies and governments need to really take some cognizance of?
Yes, I think so. And that's a very brilliant question, primarily because as crypto assets and cryptocurrencies are actually on the rise in African continents, the fear really is one called a monetary sovereignty fear that a lot of governments, and not just actually only in Africa, I have to say across the world, are actually concerned about. And that's the effect that if we have other types of currencies or assets that replace the traditional fiat currencies that countries that citizens in countries use, what that would then mean is that it will become very difficult for monetary authorities such as central banks and the like to be able to actually steer the economy as and when required in a way that helps facilitate economic stability. And the reason why this is a concern is because monetary policy is really conducted, if you like, through the domestic fiat currency. That's how it's administered. Therefore, if we have other types of currencies, such as cryptocurrencies, playing a significant role here, being used by citizens, then that becomes a real problem, or that can become a real problem for countries really across the world. In Africa, why this is problematic is because the huge rates of use and growth in the use of cryptocurrencies, which then, of course, makes this a big worry for African economies.
So we've seen the response. Before, if you looked back 5 years, there are a lot of countries not even looking into anything having to do with cryptocurrency. Now on the continent, we're seeing some legislation, some attempting to control and regulate, others still banning. But we've also seen central banks around the world respond with their own CBDCs, these central bank digital currencies. What do you think of that in response to the cryptocurrency phenomenon that the world is experiencing, that Africa too is experiencing? We've seen Nigeria is doing, Kenya is also in the works, South Africa is in the works. How is that an adequate response to this?
I think it's an absolutely brilliant response, because the idea around introducing central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, as you rightly referred to, is really to facilitate financial inclusion, i.e., get citizens who won't necessarily be able to access traditional financial services such as banks, but have a mobile device and can install a wallet on their phones and be able to actually receive central bank digital currencies and be able to transact through these CBDCs. And the idea around that is, one of the ideas or rationale really is that it facilitates financial inclusion. Obviously, there are other dimensions that need to be addressed in order to make sure that it's accessible to the common man on the African road, if you like. It's a brilliant thing also because it gives countries and countries in this sense now, monetary authorities, the opportunity to actually participate, if you like, in the space as well. So in the crypto assets ecosystem. And I say this particularly when we look at very tricky areas of regulation, such as decentralized finance, where we also see, for example, the usage of crypto assets, such as stable coins, as we know, as have become problematic of late. There's that whole idea that if central bank digital currencies are adopted across countries, then there might be a potential to actually use these as opportunities, if you like, or as stabilized digital assets to transact in the space, and therefore allay the associated risks, if you like, through the usage of things like stable coins.
So finally, Dr. Salami, before I let you go, as at November 2021, around the world, 41 countries were prohibiting banks and other financial institutions from dealing in cryptocurrencies, or had even banned crypto exchanges from offering services to individuals and enterprises. And this is compared with 15 countries in 2018, I beg your pardon. So we see that there's a trend and a trajectory. When you look at this same trend and trajectory for the African continent, how does Africa work with cryptocurrencies? Our young people are finding it something that they're involved in very definitely. So it's not something to be ignored. But how does Africa then, and African economies and regulators, manage this adoption that we're seeing?
And that's a fantastic question. It's a fantastic question because banning cryptocurrencies and banning financial institutions such as banks from transacting with crypto asset firms or crypto exchanges or crypto asset service providers is really not the answer, because that won't stop the transactions happening or occurring on these platforms. And the reason why I say this is because the transactions can occur, for example, on centralized platforms such as crypto exchanges that we are seeing increased regulatory activities on. They could also exist in the decentralized finance space, which are basically much more tricky to regulate. But these are trickier to regulate, but continue to exist. Transactions there are increasing and increasing tremendously. But crypto assets and transactions in cryptocurrencies won't go away. So regulators really across the world, so we're seeing regulation coming from the United Kingdom, the United States, even the European Union, all really trying now to deal with the pain points of regulation and dealing with regulating these types of transactions. And really, regulation has come slightly later than the advancement in the industry. So even in the West, we're seeing that there's been delays in regulation, but a lot of progress is being made, and also even in the international level. Now, African economies in particular won't be doing a great deal of service to their countries by banning crypto assets, because you can ban them from now till eternity. Those transactions are still going to happen. They're still going to happen on exchanges that are not regulated across Africa. And much more the case, they're still going to exist in decentralized finance platforms. So my advice to actually policymakers, regulators across Africa would be to begin to deal with regulating the industry, begin to look at good examples of how regulation is actually evolving across the world. Look at Singapore, look at the way it's evolving even in the United Kingdom, the financial regulatory authorities, and in this case, the United Kingdom's Financial Conduct Authority is beginning to engage with the industry, having that conversation with the industry, with technologists, with industry players, with academics as to how best to approach regulation. And I think these are the types of conversations that African economies and African governments need to be looking into.
And I think, Dr. Iwasalami, it's a conversation that we're going to have with you sometime soon, because whether we like it or not, when you look at the number of millions of Africans who are getting involved, there has to be some form of regulation and possibly protection as well for them and their money. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll be having conversations with you again sometime soon. Do have a pleasant day.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And the numbers are there for you. 4.5 million Kenyans, 4.2 million South Africans, and 12.1 million Nigerians, all involved in cryptocurrencies. That's a conversation for another day. Now, before we wrap things up, let's give you NC4 to watch. And a few stories we're keeping our eyes on. Africa's real GDP growth is likely to decelerate to 4.1% in 2022, reflecting the ebbing of base effects, uncertainties related to the persistency of the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. A Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation-backed think tank is seeking $50 billion in backing to help African nations with distressed debt to re-enter capital markets and to protect against future defaults. The South African government has agreed to take on some of state power utility Eskom's debts, but there is no consensus as to how much. And it's crunch week for the motor sector, with negotiations taking place in an attempt to resolve a deadlock and avoid a strike by the 306,000 workers employed by, among others, automotive component manufacturers, petrol service stations, and car dealerships. The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa national spokesperson said negotiations will take place today and Wednesday. And those are a few stories we're keeping our eyes on for you right here on Business Edge. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. Download our mobile app, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and watch us on all the platforms we are available. At 12 noon West African time, News Central Now, with all the latest news from here on the continent, comes your way. I'm Tolulokwe Adileru Balogun. Have a fantastic day.